Between scams and low-quality slop, a hack social experiment, and a dev crashing out in his own game's patch notes, here are 4 Steam games that were unintentionally or intentionally unlisted from Steam's store. You can actually play most of these games if they're in your library, but you can't buy them on Steam's storefront. The first game on this list led me down a little rabbit hole of publishers banned by Steam for abusing Steamworks. In preparation for the 2019-2020 holiday season, Steam purged more than 1,000 games. A Steam spokesperson mentioned that many of them were linked back to a publisher called Dagestan Technologies. A few other publishers were hit too, like Siberian Digital. Some regular developers who published games under Siberian Digital were removed just due to their affiliation. Abusing Steamworks could mean a few things, but from what I've read, Dagestan Technologies was publishing shovelware, low quality, mass-produced, and cloned games with no plans for future support. Shovelware is made to deceive you or to try and make a quick buck. Dagestan Technologies also had their own curator page, which is a page that individuals or organizations can set up to showcase games on Steam. That's one of the ways a lot of games published under different names are linked back to them. A lot of the games also had trading cards, but I'll get into that in a moment. I happen to own one of these games, Stigmat. Stigmat was a rage platformer probably inspired by Super Meat Boy, which I'm familiar with, since it was actually the first game I owned and maybe completed on Steam. I came across Stigmat like the majority of scam and ban games in my Steam library. I used to buy prepaid credit cards to run Minecraft servers for my friends. This must have been about a decade ago since the game came out in 2015. I'd end up with maybe $3 to $5 on these prepaid cards, which wasn't enough for another month. So I'd do the rational thing and go buy sketchy Steam key bundles with the rest of the money. So why would developers sell these keys in bulk? First of all, even if it was 10 games for $3, I still got scammed since they're shovelware. Not only that, but the keys are sometimes purchased with stolen credit cards, stuff like that. But a benefit to the developer for having people own and play the games is that it enables trading cards. You can use Steam trading cards to level up your Steam profile and unlock small perks and customization, and Valve assigns them a small amount of monetary value. You can sell your trading cards on the market. 85% of the profit goes to you, 10% goes to the developer, and 5% to Valve. So basically, Dagestan Technologies was likely mass-producing or publishing cheap games, trying to make a profit by bulk selling keys and bundles for a discount, and also making a tiny profit off the trading cards. 1 or 2 games wouldn't make a crazy amount of money, but you have to remember Steam removed more than 1,000 games. All of that might have added up to a decent sum. So, with that, let me show you Russian shovelware Super Meat Boy. It's nothing special. The only kind of interesting mechanic is that each level has a key needed to get back to the door, and when you grab it, something about the level changes. Maybe a new layout, maybe new obstacles. I breezed through the first 12 or so levels, then I hit level 13. I remember having beef with this level, and coming back nearly a decade later, I see why. The level is called Vertigo, and every time you tap the jump button, a small flash plays and the screen flips upside down. I tried 100, maybe 200 times before putting it down for the night. I was starting to get genuinely nauseous. I thought I had enough background footage for this video, but I ended up coming back the next day and clearing it after another 50 or so tries. The last few levels were easy enough, and I got to the very anticlimactic ending. I found a walkthrough that helped me with one of the levels, and I was amazed to see it got a comment in 2023, well after the game was closed. Shout out to Catherine and the randos still commenting on the guide. I remember being so relieved when I beat Stigmat the first time, and I left a review of it on Steam. I think it was my first review. Apparently I went back at some point and something broke, though maybe it was just an issue with my PC at the time. So Stigmat was probably removed for a good reason, but I can't help but feel bad for the people that use those publishers and got their hard work removed. The next game on this list is called Moirai, likely named after the 3 Greek fates, the personifications of destiny. You'll see why that's clever in a moment. The premise is this. You are a farmer who learns a local woman has gone missing and is asked to investigate the noises from a nearby cave. On reaching the entrance of the cave, you are given a knife by a man who claims the caves are dangerous. Partway through the cave, you cross paths with another man. You ask him, "Why are you covered in blood?" He replies, "I am a butcher. I was interrupted during my work." You ask him, "Why do you have a knife?" He replies, "It's a tool of my trade." You ask him, "Why did I hear the groans of a woman?" He replies, "I did what was best." You're unsatisfied with his answers, thinking him potentially dangerous to the town, so you attack him. Further in the cave, you find an injured woman. You ask her why she's in the cave. She tells you her backstory, and that she came here to die. You can choose to help her end her life. Either way, she spurts blood on you from the stabbing, or from cursing you as you leave to find help. Partway back from the cave, you run into a farmer. He asks you why you have blood on your overalls. You reply, "A woman spat blood on me." He asks, "Why do you have a knife?" You reply, "It was given to me." He asks, "Why did I hear groaning?" You reply, "I couldn't leave her there." I'm assuming you picked up on it already, but the twist in Moira is that the answers are from a previous player. At the end, you're prompted the same questions for the next player. I think it's a very clever game, and that other games could utilize that kind of meta player interaction more, kind of like messages in Dark Souls. At the end of the game, you could even enter your email and get notified if the next person let you pass or attacked you. I checked my emails, but couldn't find the one I received, so here's one of the ones from the game's community page. It's a shame that in 2017, hackers and trolls ended up finding a way to flood the database that held the players' answers to the questions. People also abused the answering system, as people tend to do. Obviously, with so many email addresses available, you'd have to be very careful about the security of the database. The game developers didn't have the resources to secure their database, so they nuked it, and the entire game, probably for the best. It's a shame, but maybe it'll inspire similar mechanics or another similar experience one day. The next game on this list wasn't released as shovelware, and the community wasn't at fault for it being taken down. Instead, it was the developer's own fault for posting socio-political, particularly anti-mask and anti-trans messaging in his game's patch notes. This is also your content warning. Skip to the next section if you don't want to hear about it. The game is a gladiator management simulator called Domina. From the reviews I found, they said the game was decent and had an exceptionally good soundtrack, despite some controversial elements unrelated to the developer. Maybe the controversial elements were the buying and training of slaves for combat. As I understand, that was common in Rome, and I didn't get far enough to see if there were any other controversial elements. But Domino was loved by some, regarded by others as a decent time killer. The issue began when the developer started using the game's patch notes on Steam to start posting his own ideology, with paraphrased comments such as, "Some men still won't fight. They're weak. There's no accounting for weak men. Weak men lack character. Strong moral fiber is hard to come by. It's earned through hard work and sacrifice, and it cannot be had via explicit content sites." This was related to a bug in the game where some of the characters weren't fighting each other. No way John McAfee killed himself. Did John Galt kill himself? No, but everybody at the motor company probably wished he would, in the fictional novel Atlas Shrugged by Ayn Rand. If you're a man who has inverted his penis into a vagina, the bestiarius will heal your animals, but it won't make you a woman. But this message in particular was posted before Domino's review bombed on Steam. Take off the fucking masks. Next time you're out of the grocery store, try showing a woman your face. Be confident, unafraid of the lies. You might get a girlfriend. Women like confidence. Women don't like dudes who cover their faces in fear. What are you afraid of? Getting laid? Grow up. The comments are ironic in contrast to the comments of, really, don't let strangers on the internet tell you how to live your life. If you want to be told how to live your life, read the New Testament. The internet will only give you lies. Obviously, I can't find the reviews now since the game was removed, but they also included criticism that content from the game was removed and repackaged as DLC. I don't know Steam's system well enough to tell if this was legal, since it was either content that was free in a beta branch, or was a part of some early access content or something, but wasn't a part of the main game. The developer, Big Nick of Dolphin Barn Inc., who I believe is from Quebec, wasn't happy about the review bombing in his game, continued to lash out at Steam staff, claiming that the reviews were fraudulent. Again, I don't know the legality or technicality of removing beta content and turning it into DLC. Clearly the developer didn't think it was an issue, but other people who did used it in conjunction with the politics in his patch notes to justify leaving negative reviews of the game. The review bombing is likely what put Domino on Valve's radar, and gave Big Nick a temporary mute on his own game's forums, leaving him to only be able to communicate via patch notes. Big Nick eventually got banned off Twitter after an all-night vitriolic flame war against Jim Stephanie Sterling of the Jimquisition, who did an episode on Domino and Big Nick himself, the former getting increasingly frustrated at Sterling's lack of response. I don't have the tweet since his Twitter was banned, like I said, but there are reports he was properly warned and he posted this himself. This is the second time that one of your posts violates our discussion rules and guidelines, specifically insulting or flaming another user. We're also noticing a trend with abusive messages sent when banning players from your hub. We also want to make it clear that you should not reverse Steam moderator decisions or enable rule violations in your hub. Future disregard for our rules and guidelines could jeopardize our business relationship. At some point, Big Nick was able to unban or unmute himself and still communicate on the forums, which Valve said was in violation of their decisions and actions. I don't know how the system works. It seems strange there was a way to unmute yourself. Maybe that was a bug, or maybe that was an intended feature with a use I don't know of. Then there was the Dominus, version 1.3.25 patch notes, exclaiming that the game had transitioned and not to use its dead name Domino. These patch notes directly mentioned and scorned Keffels, a controversial trans streamer, by using slurs and accusing trans people of deceiving who they sleep with. Keffels isn't above criticism, and I've heard some pretty terrible things about them, but obviously it's vile to incite harassment against an individual or group, and it was a misuse of the system to do it in your game's patch notes. That was the trigger for Valve to forcibly eject Domina and Big Nick from Steam. Despite what critics might say, Steam has a very laissez-faire management style when it comes to moderating and curating its content. On the Who Gets to Be on the Steam Store page, it says they allow everything onto the Steam Store, except for things that we decide are illegal or straight up trolling. And as a private company with explicit rules, they determined that the Dominus update patch notes did incite harassment, and after 6 months of warnings and mutes, Big Nick was subsequently banned. If he was banned explicitly for his socio-political views, other developers with socially conservative views like Thomas Mahler, developer of Ori and the Blind Forest, would have issues too. There are plenty of games with diverse and extreme political and cultural views on Steam. Take a look through the satire tag sometime. But in the end, it was Big Nick that got himself banned by rule breaking, including inciting harassment against individuals and marginalized groups, flagging reviews and undoing Steam moderator actions, and challenging Valve moderators on their unjust bans. I was going to leave it like that, but after doing some more research into the developer, particularly this video by Dive in Canada, I have some more thoughts. Big Nick chose his username because he was self-described as 6'4" and 400 pounds. A lot of his earlier patch notes and updates were joking at his own expense, referencing things like his declining physical and mental health, failed relationship, and how he hopes his ex is happier now with someone else in a self-demeaning way. A lot of his other posts show how lonely and isolated he was, with Domina and his fanbase likely being his only source of social interaction. In several patch notes, he also belittled his own programming skills despite making the entire game himself in C++ with, I think, the Allegro library. As a guy into software and programming, making your entire game in C++ is kinda wild to me, and we both now agree you're better off just using a game engine. Anytime there was a memory leak or issue with Twitch integration or a bug, he'd blame himself and suggested anyone having issues to refund the game. What I see is a lonely, unhappy man who has a hard time understanding other people's perspectives. Someone who turned to alt-right, reactionary, and conspiracy echo chambers like Kiwi Farms and later Gab that validated him and made him feel superior by projecting his own insecurities and weaknesses onto others, especially marginalized groups in the flavor of current year. He's been active as late as a year or two ago on a Banimated Steam account, though this might be an impersonator, still disagreeing with Valve's decision but open to returning to Steam if they quote-unquote apologize to him. I think what he did was harmful and his opinions are unfounded. Even though I said he might have been in a bad place, it's not an excuse for targeted harassment, being argumentative to users and staff, and abusing patch notes to post his own opinions. But I do believe that anyone can grow as a person, so despite it all, I hope he's doing better. I hope one day he can see past his prejudice and victim mentality and understand that crashing out in his game's patch notes wasn't proper behavior. I don't know if he'd ever be welcomed back on Steam or forgiven, but that'd be a good first step. Here's a couple honorable and dishonorable mentions, since I doubt I'll ever talk or even think about these games again. It's also going to be a little bit of a palate cleanser from that last section. Jump Sky is the game featured at the intro, and it's just shovelware. You are a red ball trying to roll to the end. Not too much to note about this one, but the Steam page is kind of ominous. And there are many screenshots of people who reach the end that say there's random images of anime girls and models, including what looks like an LLM generated image of Diva from Overwatch. I tried Last Tale on a whim in an attempt to try all the games in my Steam library a while ago, but lost interest after a few minutes. I don't know why it was removed, but I think the developers or publishers are Russian, so it might have been hit as a part of that effort to remove shovelware. Jerry McPartlin, Rebel with a Cause, is a weird one since there's not too much info on it. Sounds like there was an issue or a dispute between the developer and the publisher, and the game got DMCA striked at some point. Then the developer got the game's rights back, but he had to remove all of the publisher's branding, but for some reason it never made its way back onto Steam. Peaky Blinders and a few other games like Friday the 13th, Killer Puzzle in my library were removed due to licenses expiring. Actually, did you know that the first Alan Wake was almost removed because of licensing issues and contracts expiring with some of the music they used? That would have been a shame since it's a pretty good game. The store page for Grey Cubes is still up, but if you try visiting it, you get Grey Cubes is no longer available on the Steam store. Grey Cubes is a brick breaker game, but with 3D physics simulation. It has a strangely high review score, and a more than expected amount of people talking about it on the community page. I'm sure I probably got it in a bundle around 2015 or 2016, the same as everyone else there, so I do feel an odd sense of connection with them. But that leads us to our final game on this list, which was not received warmly. This last game's kind of special to me since I made a video covering it before. The game is called Cubro 2 or Cubro 2, I never learned how to say it, but the funny thing is that the game didn't always look like this. When I first got this game as a part of one of those key bundles I bought, it was a shovelware Minecraft ripoff called Voxelized. You could break blocks, place blocks, and dig through the floor then spawn at the ceiling. Maybe amusing for like 2 minutes if you haven't played Minecraft before. I was going to include it in a video on the worst games in my Steam library on a different channel years ago, but when I went to go get some footage, the game had changed. Instead of being that voxel Minecraft ripoff, it was an Unreal Engine asset flip where we kind of just walk around town as a knight. Still called voxelized despite being made of low poly assets. But I didn't know that before the game turned into the Knight game, it had been updated to a Minecraft clone with Unreal Engine assets, so what gives, right? I looked into the developer, Lord Cress. Fortunately, the 2 articles on a blog called MMO Fallout covering him were still up, and I was reminded he published a different game that also happened to coincidentally be covered by Jim Stephanie Sterling, Into the Light. In the game Into the Light, you're a little pip of light wandering around the town. It posed itself as a puzzle game, and at first some people lauded it as incredibly clever, as no one was able to figure out how to get into the next level. Lord Crest claimed that you would need hints from the trading cards to progress, but that meant you would need to play for more than 2 hours to earn those trading cards, making the game invalid for refunds. That applause slowly turned into frustration and finally anger when data miners discovered there was no second level. Lord Crest claimed that a bug had removed 6 out of the 7 promised levels, and he would be working to patch them back in. So yeah, checking his Twitter account, which is up but still inactive, Guy was a prick, mostly insulting gamers, and had a hard-on for comparing himself to Hideki Kamiya, the director of Resident Evil 2, Devil May Cry, and the Okami games. After getting enough backlash for making his money through selling Steam keys in bulk or the profit off the trading cards, he sold Voxelized to another developer or just rebranded and tried again. So this other developer, assuming it is a different dev, probably paid under $100 for the game, since it still costs $100 USD to upload a game to Steam now. Since Voxelized already had some notoriety, interested players, and press, I think the new developers thought they could turn it into a successful game. So that's how we got Cubro 2. I found that there was a Cubro 1, and it was released with the same cover art. It's almost certainly the same game. The UI is obviously terrible. I spent about 4 minutes fooling around, trying to figure out how to play. Whenever I ran into something, I'd gain some score but lose a life. Funny enough, I realized I had the same problem as when I tried it last time. They tell you the controls in the options menu and you need to use the arrow keys to shoot. From a programming perspective, I imagine there's a bit of code that adds to the player's score whenever one of the enemies are removed from the game. And when you collide with one of the enemies, they're removed and you lose a life. So having them run into you still triggers the code to give you a little bit of score. I'd be surprised if that was intended, but if statements are programming 101. If destroyed by player's projectile add score, else don't add score, that kind of thing. But anyways, you just move around, shoot things, try and get a high score. The maps might be procedurally generated, which is kinda nifty, but the gameplay is very basic. If you delete everything in the map, a path opens up, and you do the next one until you eventually lose. The game never got updated past the post announcing its changes in developer team, which again is very strange. The developer/publisher 2127 Games haven't published anything else besides Cubro and Cubro 2, but it's tagged as early access on SteamDB, so you never know. Next year could be the year of Cubro. So those were 4, but actually 10 or 11 games in my library that you can't play. I wanted to focus on those 4 since I was more familiar with their stories. Like I said, you can still buy some of these games on third-party key sites, but why would you? If you want to see some games in my library that you can buy and play, at least for now, you can check out my video on 18 indie action games that you missed. Or you can stick around for my mini-series on indie games ported to mobile. The first episode is already out. Thanks, I'll see you around.